Lue Elizondo getting called out by someone in the UAP community who's just kind of blown up all over the place and has become like kind of a, I don't know, like a big voice. I ain't even heard of UAP Gerb until I don't know, recently. Names just keep popping up, but not in a way where someone's like making content and people are start watching their videos. Like a Jesse Michaels is an example, right? Like Jesse Michaels is someone who I'm a huge fan of. Jesse Michaels. Had the pleasure of having him on the show and having a great conversation with him, and I'm a massive fan of him as a human being. But Jesse, was friendly already with David Grush, and it popped up, and gradually just you heard his name more. He did more interviews, and gradually became one of the bigger names. I didn't even know where this guy came from. UAP Gerb. I think is he working for your NewsNation now or something? I don't know what the hell he's doing, but I hear his name every 5 seconds, and now so much so that he can make a statement, and now it's news. Meaning that Ross Coulthart talked to him, and the accusation is that Lue Elizondo is disinformation again. We've heard this about Lue, right? And he also says just a major mistake if they make him Lue, the UAP czar. So I'm going to play this clip from NewsNation with UAP Gerb and Ross Coulthart. We're going to talk about this, get into it a little bit, and then we're going to see Lue's response. Check it.
There are those who are digging for that reverse engineering recovery program of non-human technology, and there are those who are saying, just be happy with what you've got. Be happy with the small d disclosure. Is someone trying to control the narrative?
Yes. You made a statement recently as of recording this program where you talked about allegations and rumors of a pretty high-profile person within the UAP topic being appointed at a very high level to kind of spearhead the disclosure initiative or be integral to it out of the White House or executive branch. I'm going to go ahead and take that leap, and I will be very plain here. That individual is Lue Elizondo, and he is currently being tasked, likely has the position for a National Security Council level role, exactly what he had been looking for as the quote-unquote UAP czar. This is detrimental to the disclosure process. This is extremely concerning. Like you said, of partial disclosure, limited disclosure, we have seen this before. This takes me back, this takes us back to the year of 2017, in which Lue Elizondo and a cadre of other individuals under a program, an informal working group called ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, had been working from 2009 to roll out a partial disclosure campaign at the behest of Lieutenant General and Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. Once again, we are in this situation, and it is perilous for the disclosure effort.
All right, there you go. UAP Gerb throwing bombs. So the non-shocking part of it, right, is allegations against Lue in the fact that he has been a disinformation agent, or at least controlling the way UAP information actually comes out. The troubling aspect of it is when he talks about ATIP and being part of 2017, you could start asking questions. And I think we've talked about this before. Or it's like, okay, wait a minute. 2017, it lines up. This, the controlled disclosure. The New York Times article comes out. Some footage comes out. Lue's really spearheading it. He doesn't really have to go into hiding for the most part. He writes a book. Does okay. He's got potential government jobs again. There's been reports that there's conversations with him and his wife, and they talked about that they've been not that their lives changed dramatically and not for the best. Someone could say, yeah, but that's just what he's supposed to say, and then it could be very true. But he's befriended a lot of people. Ross Coulthart being one of those, speak highly of him. However, Ross Coulthart did indeed call him out not too long ago. We did a video on it here and talked about the idea that it is certainly possible, and he has to be upfront and forthcoming with everybody about what his past roles were and what else he does know. And I don't think UAP Gerb is wrong when he says that that is indeed the case, and there's an agenda agent being the UAP czar for the Pentagon. Yeah, of course that's an issue. Now, how do you vet that? Or is that intentional that he's there, that they're already aware of who he is? So is it detrimental just to us who want to get actual information out? Or is it detrimental to those who are actually trying to do something about it and they don't know this level? But to be fair, we still don't know 100%. Hey, I want to know how UAP Gerb knows all of this for sure, for factual, that he can go and talk about it publicly on Ross Coulthart's show. Because Lue Elizondo didn't just sit by. Lue's not a guy who just sits by and lets you take shots or allegations or whatnot. He responded. Here's part of that response.
Howdy, folks. Lue here. As you can tell, I'm in my pickup truck, and I'm hauling, what you can't see is a substantially long trailer, almost 50-foot flatbed. For those of you who might not know, I have made a permanent move to the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm still in the process of collecting my things and my items, but I am there as disclosure is a full-time commitment for myself. I'd like to discuss with you a few things for these short moments. Forgive me, I am at a rest stop right now, so I'm not driving, but I do have to get back on the road. I would like to talk about the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement, that everybody thinks that the president has just somehow magically waived and now we don't have an NDA anymore. It is true that the president signed a presidential directive that has not been yet made public, so we don't know exactly what's in there, and I applaud that effort. I think it's fantastic. It's a great move forward. The problem is it doesn't alleviate us from our NDAs. What it does, it alleviates us from our NDAs from discussing this conversation about UAP with none other than who? Arrow, which, as you know, I already did. Spoke several times with Arrow. And unfortunately, at the time, Sean Kirkpatrick, the former director, didn't do a whole lot of good with that. Secondly, we can also talk to Pursue, which I may already be talking to elements of Pursue. But unfortunately, it has not alleviated my ability to speak to the general public. And this is why it's important that the U.S. government really push hard to continue to pass legislation so folks like myself, the whistleblowers, can come forward and have that conversation, not just internally within the U.S. government, but with you specifically. And so it's important for several reasons, because really there's a lot of confusion right now that, oh, Lou, you don't have an NDA anymore. You can say whatever you want. That's not true. I am still held by my secrecy oath, and until the government gives me the ability to speak openly about it, I can only go through two channels, either Arrow, which I wasn't overly impressed with the first time, and neither were my colleagues, and I don't think Congress was either, or Pursue. And like I said, I might already be talking to some individuals there, either directly or indirectly. The second issue was brought to my attention that there was a interview done very recently on Ross Coulthart's reality check show under the NewsNation moniker. And they had a guest on there that spoke really some incredible, outlandish claims that are 180 degrees false, and they're just not factual. And so what I want to do is address that real quick. And why is that? Because in this process of disclosure, there are people out there that are trying to hijack and derail this conversation by feeding you false information. People who claim to be on the inside, who know information, they don't. And they're saying things, frankly, I can only suspect for clicks and likes. So please be careful of that. First and foremost, one of the allegations was that ATIP was a limited hangout. Well, let's not forget that in 2009, Senator Harry Reid himself, who was the chairperson for the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence for the U.S. Senate, that was his program. That was his. They paid for it with U.S. taxpayer money, and he even sent a letter in 2009, a memo, official memo, to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Lynn, at the time. So if this was a limited hangout that was being paid by U.S. government taxpayer money, then by default you're saying that the SISI itself is a limited hangout, and by extension the U.S. Congress and even the U.S. government. So that simply doesn't make sense. It's factually not correct. It's not true. Not sure where this individual's getting their information, but they're not getting it from people who actually know. Another allegation that was made during this interview was that somehow General Clapper and I had colluded with one another to try to go ahead and create this soft disclosure, and that we were going to go ahead and manage it and control it. That is 1,000% not accurate. In fact, we never had such a conversation, and Jim Clapper and I never meant to have that conversation. So again, it's factually not correct. And the problem is that you have an individual here who is sensationalizing stuff and making stuff up, quite frankly, who has ulterior motives. That's deceiving you. And furthermore, they're getting attention on a national news network that, by the way, I respect, and that's always been a friend of disclosure, and now manipulating them and providing false information to their audience to the point where they're like a tabloid. And I think this is problematic. If you want to know why I've always said I want to destroy ufology and replace it with something better, this is why. Because of bad actors like this, people who come out, they're just interested in clicks and likes, they're only interested in manufactured and false drama, and they're going about doing things that are actually putting disclosure further back than where we are. And this is a problem. I'll share something else with you, too, another anecdote about to show you the character of this individual. Recently, as a month ago, I attended a function in Washington, D.C. This individual happened to be there. I didn't know who he was, but I saw a circle of people surrounding him, and they were berating him. I worried for his safety to some degree, and maybe figured he was getting picked on, and walked over and interjected. And as I pulled him away, I was told, hey, that's the guy that's been talking crap about everybody and been making things up. So I pulled him aside and I said, hey, look, these people are obviously pretty upset with you. If you have any questions in the future, here's my personal cell phone number. Now, this went against my better judgment, but I did it anyways. As you all know, I'm very open and transparent. So I said, look, if you ever have any questions, please give me a call. And obviously, he looked at me. He had, to me, it looked like tears in his eyes. And he looked at me and said, oh, okay, sir, yes, I promise I'll do that. I'll make sure that I call you if I have any questions in the future, and I won't do that. And just start spewing off of garbage. And I look and say, good, I appreciate that. We can be friends. I'm happy to, whether you agree with me or not, I'm happy to give you information. Just reach out to me and I can clarify stuff. Well, guess what? A month later, he goes on a network television series and starts spewing off more crap that was completely wrong. He never called me once, right? So what kind of due diligence, investigative type skill set does it require just to go out and make up stuff about people, right? And this is why we're having a problem. If you want to know what's wrong with the UFO community, you have people out there, and by the way, yes, I'm addressing you who lied, to look in the mirror. You're the reason why we're having this problem with disclosure. You're the reason why people don't take this topic seriously, and frankly, you should be ashamed of yourself. I know I'm ashamed for what you did. You should be embarrassed. And the fact that you're talking to people and claiming you have access to stuff you don't, I don't ever remember you in any of the meetings that I was at the Pentagon or at ATIP, quite frankly. In fact, if you want inside information, going to talk to somebody and saying you have an inside source, as far as I'm concerned, that's called gossip. That's not information. And secondly, I think it's also important to say that as you continue to disparage and provide false information, remember, there's real consequences. There are real consequences for your actions and what you are doing. And I would not want to be you right now, because when this all comes out that you're just BSing, I think there's going to be a price to pay. So anyways, folks, I hope you're well. I didn't want to address this. I hate having to do this, because all it does is goad people and more people to want to have conversations. I'm in the middle of a drive across country. Last thing I need to do is deal with this headache. But I think it's important enough to address it, and address it head on, and let you know the truth. I've always been committed to the truth. Hopefully most of you know that by practice. And be wary. Be very careful of people who are trying to paint a false narrative and then try to get attention for it.
All right, yeah, I played that whole thing because there's a lot I wanted to dive into with Lue's response there. There's a lot of arguing against Lue. There's a lot of arguing for Lue in that situation, right? Or what he said there, I should say. Both sides of it, of what angle do you take it from. The first thing to start with is the NDA aspect of it, and what he opens the video with, and I think that's also something to really dive into, because we've been talking about this, and he's right, where it's like everyone's like, oh, the NDA is lifted, everyone's gonna be able to talk. He's like, no, it's not the case. Here's what you'd be able to do. You talk to Arrow. Well, I've talked to Arrow before. You can talk to this person. So he's basically kind of like, it's not a big deal. He gives you that kind of, backhanded compliment. No, it's great what they're doing, but it kind of sucks. And here's why. So there's two ways to look at that. The first, he's being honest with you. He's telling you don't get your hopes up because it's a great step to try, but it doesn't really move the needle at all. And he can't, it doesn't mean because they did these things that he and other people can just talk about everything that they know. That's the way you can defend it. If you're like, okay, that's what he's saying. The other side of it is the arguing against him, where he's saying, well, we didn't want this to happen, but just to let you guys know, these other people we don't want talking, they're not going to talk. No, there's a lot more they need to do and jump through hoops before we're going to let anybody talk. So if it's controlled and if it's one of these things where if he is, again, if you're making the case against him, if he gets to that position of power, because it is curious that he is now in this potential position of power that he's in right now, with giving up the secrets that he did and giving up the things that he did in 2017 and all that. Now, the answer to that could be, well, he was rewarded in the same way that David Grush was rewarded. David Grush because nobody questions Grush. I shouldn't say nobody, but most people don't. And this is the same exact way. And so he built his way back up and with the people who were really advocating for this to work, and he got himself into that position of power. And that's a fair argument. But there's also, you could say, yeah, but was this always the plan? Was it always the thing? He was always in place to get farther and farther, or higher and higher, rather, up the chain to be able to narrate exactly what they wanted to do. Now, when he dives into, I don't love the threat that he gives this guy at the end. I wouldn't want to be you. Because this is Lue's job was interrogation and all those other things, and he was someone who did threats, did other things, tactics, scare tactics, whatever, and that's what that was at the end. And then also saying, people wanted to beat the shit out of this guy, and I came in there and I said, hey, don't beat him up, and I got him. Hey, you know what? Here's my number. You good? And then he's like, and he's talking other nonsense, and then the guy turns on me. I mean, come on. So that part of it, I didn't love. I didn't think he needed to do that. You could have done what you did initially, which is make your case of why he is not telling the truth. You can go down the route of saying, who the hell is this guy? Because in the same way where Lue Elizondo shows up, does his thing, in 2017, stays in the public eye, gets to this position of power, becomes a big voice inside of this. This guy, UAP Gerb, comes out of nowhere. I looked at his YouTube channel. The video from 2 years ago was his first video. And now he's everywhere. And now people are listening to him, no matter what he says. It's my question would be how does he know the information? I don't know the answer to it. Not saying he's not legit, just saying, how does he know? Why am I supposed to believe him is the answer. There's the question, rather. Why am I supposed to believe him? Now, Ross Coulthart, when he's out there, I've seen Ross do enough investigating and journalism I know who he is. He's had enough, not just in the UAP topic, he's been around for a long time. And he's a reporter. He said, I don't always agree with him, but he's legit. And so when he's having these conversations with people, I'm like, okay, I'm listening. What's the report? And then to say an allegation like that for this guy, it's like, well, why is this guy on? Why isn't Pavel on? And I say that lovingly. I love Pavel. He's a good friend of mine. But what's the difference between Pavel, who's very knowledgeable in this, these topics, and he has his theories and other things, whether it's about consciousness or other things that I find fascinating. You can't find another person like Pavel who's as educated in this topic. But why was UAP Gerb picked for this? And again, maybe he was hired. I think is he the? I know there was somebody that was hired by NewsNation as a reporter. Is that the guy? I mean, because that's the answer to the question. If that's the case, is he applied, he got himself in there, and I look at it like back in the day when I was I started on YouTube movie reviews, and then I applied for jobs at Fandango, and I got a job at Fandango. And it's like, okay, well, there's that guy that was on YouTube, I guess, because of this. And that happens. So I don't know. Maybe that's what happened with this guy. But diving back into the topics with what Lue says, and there does seem to be a bit of a defense side of it, of these things that he's saying, like, well, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this. And he's defending himself in a way that he's like, well, it's factually not true. My thing, when you say that, you said this guy is lying and he's telling you the truth, and he's not telling you the truth, and he is there for just clicks. Okay, that's fine. You have every right to defend yourself in what he's saying, but what are you combating that with? Don't believe him. Well, why not? Why shouldn't I believe him? Well, because he's not telling the truth. Okay, why not? Like, do you, in the same way I'm asking UAP Gerb, how do you definitively know Lue Elizondo was trying to contain information? Ross Coulthart in his report said that he was speaking to people that worked with Lue and other things, and I don't love it because it's not definitively, but enough. What's UAP Gerb? What did you hear? What do you know? And the same goes for Lue. All right, he's not telling the truth. Why? How come? Just because people were yelling at him, hey, he's the guy that says mean things about people, so we're going to get him. I don't know if I believe that story either. What'd you do? You just said, hey, come on. He took him by his arm and got him out of the angry mob? Dodging pitchforks? I don't know. I don't know if I buy it. I don't know if I buy either one of the stories. I don't know. But it seems like a he said at this point. But where I do agree with Lue is you can only say and accuse somebody of something on national news or whatever for so long before you got to put up or shut up. You got to be able to say, well, here's who I've been talking to. This is the reason why I say that. This is the reason why I have confidence that I can say that. And then you got to have Lue combat that, because this is Lue's job. Lue's job is to be able to say, no, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true. That's not true. That one's true, but I want you to know that one's true. That's not. And that's what he does. So he's going to do a video from his car combating it, because he's like, enough is enough. Because the other side of it is, look, what did we ever remember the video from Amy Eskridge? And if you don't know who Amy Eskridge is, Amy was the scientist, one of the scientists that, well, she wound up being, they found her body. And most people looking into it, including myself, I'll say that, don't believe that she did it herself. When you look at the videos and the things that she said, and she did not have glowing things to say in one of the videos that I saw about Lue Elizondo, and I believe it was Hal Puthoff, two of them. You can find the video. I'm not making that up. It's somewhere. If I had it, I'd play it, but I don't have it on me. But there's been these kind of accusations about Lue, and that there's things that there's a narrative. I don't think he's not as upfront as he's making you believe he is. Doesn't mean that I think he's an agent of disinformation. It just means, like anybody else in the world of government, and especially his job, he's letting you know what he wants you to know. And he's going to respond when it's time to respond. Because when Ross Coulthart essentially made the same accusations that he did, Lue didn't come after Ross in the same scathing way. They essentially said the same thing, that he was a disinformation agent and he's been working for these programs and everything too. Ross just had someone else back him up from what he had already heard. But Lue went after him and went after him hard. And then took a shot at NewsNation and said, you're becoming a tabloid now. But he's treading on how he goes after them. It's very interesting. What do I believe? I don't know. Not enough facts. Neither one of them proved enough for me to say, yep, I believe that guy or that guy. I don't know. Guy shooting a video in the car and a guy that I just heard of 3 days ago. No clue. No idea. What do you guys think? Put your thoughts in there. Let me know. Things are heating up. Make sure you subscribe, click like, comment, do all that and more. Appreciate you being here. I'll see you on the flip side.